What's going on, guys? Trying to get a little bit of a jump on this week's shop update. It's actually only Thursday, so we're actually doing pretty well for ourselves. But if this happens to be your first time on the channel or your first time watching one of these, this is my weekly shop update. And basically, I just like to take a little bit of time each week, fire up the camera and just talk about maybe a couple of projects that I've been working on or a couple of accomplishments I've made. And, sometimes I may even get off on a tangent of some lessons learned or some shop philosophy, or maybe even just tell a story. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. As I was looking around before I turned the camera on, I actually feel like I accomplished a little bit more than I thought I did this week. So, I guess theoretically, I should actually have quite a bit to talk to you guys about. So I guess I should probably, like I say, jump right into it. One thing I was working on this week, I am starting another slip joint trapper build. These are some handles or some covers, depending on, which terminology you like the best. It's going to be more or less a shadow pattern, but these are the handle scales that I cut out on my CNC router. And that actually kind of led me down another little bit of a tangent or a rabbit hole this week. And just to give you a little background on how I do these, normally I'll start off with just a piece of rough cut stock, some 3/16 thick linen micarta in this case. That's about 2.5 by 5 inches in dimension. I'll tape that down or fasten it down to my spoil board on my router, and then I'll start my first operation, which for this knife is the liner reliefs. I'll do a pass around the profile, about 40 to 60 thousandths deep. I forget what it's set to, if even that. And then I'll drill some positioning holes, which actually are also, they end up being the bottom back spring holes the pins go into on the knife. And what these do, they allow me to flip it over and position it in some pre-milled holes on my spoil board that allow me to line up the other side, for the second and third ops, which will be the final outside profile, the rest of the pockets and holes, and then finally a ball mill gets put into the spindle for the contouring. And this is what I end up with. And during that process, I also cut an inlay, press and glue that into place. And that way, as I'm profiling, this side of the cover, I can go ahead and profile that inlay as well. And this is not the finished product, although it comes off, pretty nice and clean looking. There is still some blending to do, some uniformity that I need to achieve, with some hand sanding and polishing. I've also got to clean up these insides where I've surfaced that original part. And you can see the reliefs there that the blade travels into. So there's still actually quite a bit of work left to do on these, though this takes a little bit of that guesswork out. It doesn't do it all for me, at least not yet. Now that being said, as I set up my first piece of stock this week and started that first op, I noticed a pretty big discrepancy in the cut depth from one liner relief to the other. So just to double check everything, I threw my spindle square in and swept my spoil board. And while the x-axis was still pretty much perfect, within about 1,000th or better at the time, when I turned it into the Y orientation, I was off over the 5.5 inches of my spindle square width. And let me just grab that to show you what that is. But over that 5.5 inches, I was reading off 100 thousandths from one side to the other. And just to help you guys visualize what I mean here, this is a spindle square I made, or a tramming square. Basically, it goes in the spindle, you go down to your table, or in this case, a spoil board, and you zero it out. Both should theoretically read 0 when the spindle is square. Essentially, in my X rotation, it did. When I turned 90 degrees into the Y, one read 0 or actually one read -60 and one read +40. So, you know, that means whereas this might have been square, you know, on this side, you know, it's cocked like that, you know, to exaggerate it. So, you know, basically I had to kind of start everything from scratch. You know, I readjusted my gantry, you know, adjusted my spindle where I could. I also replaced the spoil board and just tried to get everything dialed in as close as I possibly could. Because if you don't start off, you know, dialed in, you know, you're pretty much done for before you get started. So, you know, made all the tweaks and adjustments necessary. Finally got both the X and the Y within about 1/1000th and a half, you know, give or take. So, you know, I could probably do just a little bit better than that even. But, you know, at a certain point, you're kind of chasing your tail a little bit, you know, especially given the limitations of the machine. You got to understand, you know, there's inherent flex in the machine. I mean, the motors are imparting some force and flex into it. You know, the weight of the router, the forces against the cutting bit. You know, even if I had that perfectly dialed into 0 in all directions and I could sweep that 360 degrees and not move the needle on that square even 1/1000th of an inch, you know, just assume for a second I'm dead flat and dead square everywhere within 1/1000th of an inch, which is impossible, but let's just pretend in, you know, theoretical land that were the case. You know, the way this machine is built and put together, you know, as soon as I put in a tool bit and started cutting material, the flex that imparts on that machine is pretty much going to negate any accuracy that I set into that machine before I started running it. You know, which isn't to say that you shouldn't start off as close to 0 as you can, you know, to begin with. But you still have to understand, you know, again, if I'm square and flat to 1/1000th of an inch, my parts still aren't going to come off, you know, accurate to within 1/1000th of an inch just because of the flexes and the forces and the cutting bits and just the inherent, you know, discrepancies, you know, that's part of that. So that's why I kind of said 1/1000th and a half is good enough. You know, that's still extremely close. You know, visually looking at the spoil board, I mean, there's like no steps, nowhere my nail's cutting. Looks like almost a factory finish, you know, everywhere I'm looking at here. So, you know, I'm as happy as I could be with that. And actually part of that, by the way, is due to a new surfacing bit that I bought specifically for that, you know, as well as for surfacing materials that I'm machining. This is probably the most expensive bit I've bought to date. Other than for my knee mill, I bought some indexable cutters that were in the $100 range or more for that. But for my CNC, this one was about $75. And, you know, I got to thinking, normally I buy, you know, these guys, they're little cheapies, you know, $15, $20, $25 surfacing bits, almost like generic brands. This one says Valiant on it. You know, normally I get the bigger shanks, 1/2 inch, maybe 2-inch diameter. This one's got 2 cutters, carbide cutters on it that are brazed on. This one is actually almost identical to the one I just showed you, but they're brazed on, one-time use. This is about $20 to $25. And it's a Nitomac, Nitomak. You know, it got the job done for a little while, but they wear out and then they're pretty much garbage. I mean, they're throwaway. And again, they're $20, $25 each. You might possibly find one for around $15. Very rarely though, they're usually about $25 each, if not $30. This one, $75, but it's got 4 razor sharp carbide cutters. These are tungsten carbide, mirror polished, and they're indexable, and you can actually rotate it. They're 90-degree edges, So you can rotate it 4 times. And you basically get 4 for the price of 1 here. So this comes with the 3 bits. I can rotate them 4 times. So essentially 4 surfacing bits in one, you know, at least. And really I could probably take 2 of them out and just leave 1 cutter in and have essentially 12 surfaces in one. For what, 3 times the cost of one of these kind of single use guys. You know, you start thinking about it like that, and that's actually quite a bit cheaper, you know, just with a one-time use. Now, what I've also done for $25, I bought a 10-pack of replacement cutters, and it also comes with 3 spare screws, by the way. But I've got a 10-pack of replacement cutters. Keep in mind they take 3 each, so I'll have 1 extra. But basically that's 3 more sets of cutters plus 1, which gives me 4 more tries each as well. So basically 12 more cutters for $25. You know, now that I've got the bit already paid for, you know, as long as I take care of, you know, the holder itself. You know, think about that. 25 bucks for those cutters, which basically gives me, you know, 12 brand new surfacing bits. That's what, $2 each, 2 and some change per cutter versus $25, $30. So yeah, you'll pay a little bit up front, but when you start kind of factoring out over the long term what your tool bits cost or the replacement bits, again, keeping in mind that you're taking care of the holder and you're not crashing it or tweaking it or warping it or whatever, that actually ends up over the life of that tool. I mean, it's almost free, you know. For what I can use that for the quality of product I'll get, you know, I'll make that back with the first thing I sell off this machine easily. And, you know, I guess if I think about it, even beyond that, you know, I kind of crap on amount of tools, at least in my head. I've never done it publicly, although maybe I'm technically doing it now. You know, I've always kind of thought to myself, there's no way I'm ever paying, you know, $60 for an end mill or $150 to $250 plus for a surfacing bit. But, you know, as I'm kind of explaining it right now and talking out loud, I guess if you're doing this professionally for a living, then yeah, they're worth it. You know, are they overpriced? I think so. A lot of guys swear by them. I have a hard time justifying when I can buy a bit like that for $75. Is that amount of tool bit, you know, that does the same thing for $150 to $250? You know, is that 2 times, 3 times, 4 times better than that $75 bit, you know, that I can get inserts once again for $25 for 10? You know, what's the amount of inserts cost? I don't know, but something to think about. You know, in the long run, if you kind of extrapolate it out like that, you know, they're not as expensive as they seem initially. Once again, as long as I'm not crashing them and ruining them, you know, that'll be a sad day if that ever happens. But anyway, all that to say, I kind of went down that rabbit hole. New spoil boards, squared the machine up again, and got everything dialed in very well. And now, you know, I've got 2 covers done. They need a little bit of work. I got to dial in my feeds and speeds too when trying to use that bit to surface Garolite or micarta, as there was a little bit of glazing or burning. Should be able to take that out with a buffer and some sandpaper. But other than that, get much better tolerances. And I still got to blend it. I still got to finish these, but it definitely starts me off on a much better foot than, you know, had I not done the adjustments or bought that bit. So that's that. I also had couple of springs and blades already heat treated that I surface ground today. They still need cleaned up around the profiles. They still need dialed in on the rise and fall indicator. And then ultimately the bevels and things need to be ground. But, you know, we are making progress. I got progress in the hand right there. And hopefully everything continues, you know, on an upward trend. You know, there's always going to be setbacks, I guess. But so far, nothing I can't fix, I don't think. So I just want to double check that. Yeah, everything looks nice and even here. Very happy with how these came out. And you can see that mill relief, which actually I probably should have started off a little higher than that. We'll see. And if anything, I'll just cut some new ones and reprogram the tooling. Although Fusion 360 may prevent me from doing that very easily now. That's a whole nother video. We won't get into that on this update. So that's that and those things. One other thing I did this week, I had a spare T12 by 48 shop light. I added above my table. Just so I could see tool changes and things a little bit better. You know, I've still got this guy here, which I'll turn on, add a little bit more light to the video. So added more lighting, you know, more shop upgrades. I try to do at least one a week, give or take. Also bolted this railroad track anvil down to the floor a little better, so it's not going to be jumping around like it was. Before I had no bolts in it, then I put one bolt in it. Now I've got 2 bolts in it, and it's rock solid. Very excited to use that. I also went ahead and coated the inside of my forge with some ITC 100. This is on its about 24th hour of air drying. I'm going to give it another day. Tomorrow's Friday, so when I get home from work, I might fire it up on a low heat just to do any final curing. And then maybe I'll play around with some forging. I've actually got several tong blanks cut out of some rebar. Got them all cleaned up on the wire wheel, cleaned all the rust off. And these are all about 2 feet long. Cut a couple of 10-footers up into fifths, which should give me roughly about the same length to work with, or a little bit longer than my first pair of tongs, which I really like how these came out. So I'm going to practice on those a little bit, maybe make another pair of straight tongs or 2, maybe some box jaw tongs, you know, stuff for holding round stock and square stock. So get those prepped and ready. And what else? I think that's about it. You know, we're at almost 20 minutes once again. You know, I really try not to make these that long, but just so much to talk about, right? So, you know, we're definitely making progress. We're moving forward. You know, I've still got a lot of things on the back burner. You know, still moving forward, you know, making plans for a plasma table. Probably actually looking into a forge press build now as well, although the plasma table is still more or less the priority. I've got a lot of things that I think that would roll into and lend itself to more quickly than the forge press would, although I'd really love a forge press right now. But, you know, I'm going to start kind of getting parts and pieces for both as they come up. Plasma table being the priority. Other than that, you know, the podcast, it's kind of taking a back burner right now. I've just been so busy with my kids, you know, in their schooling, being out here in the shop and working on things. The guys I'm trying to line up are busy, which I understand. It's still going to happen eventually, but not as soon as I thought it would, and that's been kind of a hard one to swallow, a hard one to admit. But, you know, it's still in the works. I kind of got to see a few more things happen first. And I think I also really need to get a cell phone signal booster, since the majority of interviews will be over the phone, recorded directly from my phone. I get a really bad signal in my basement, and I just hate to waste people's time by getting halfway through an interview and my phone cutting out. So that's kind of one part of the reason I'm holding off too. I need about $400 or $500 probably to buy one that will actually work well enough to be worth buying. I did just upgrade my internet as well as my router and modem. I had a new one, swapped out. It was having some issues, so hopefully that takes care of that. Which that ended up being a whole story in and of itself. Which I guess if there's a request, I'll share that if anybody wants to hear it. But it was bizarre. But anyway, like I said, we're already at the 20-minute mark. I don't want to go much farther than this. I could talk for hours and days, which is part of the reason I want to start a podcast. But anyway, I do thank anybody who made it to the end once again. Thank you guys for watching. Welcome to, looks like I've gotten about 1 subscriber per day this month. So welcome to you guys. Hopefully you become long-term viewers and members of the channel here. I do have other videos and ideas that I'm kind of working on. I don't want to just do these updates every week like I do without throwing a little something extra in between them. So we're working towards that. But again, I do appreciate you guys that put up with me and follow my work. And anybody who has something encouraging to say. I don't appreciate this fly. For whatever reason, it's not hitting that paper over there, but again, I digress. So thanks, guys. This kind of turned into a disaster here towards the end, but I'll say it one more time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.